Maura's Moxie, Oppression of Tibet. How significant is Tibet to the U.S.-China bilateral relations? How has the political climate in the U.S. for Tibet changed over the years?
How significant is Tibet to the U.S.-China bilateral relations?
Another very, very thoughtful and important question. Thank you so much. Well, I don't think it's important at all anymore, because thanks to Bill and Hillary Clinton and Obama, and these are Democrats, my party, I'm a Democrat. My father was a famous liberal Democratic senator who was in John F. Kennedy's administration. I'm ashamed of my own party. Now, it's bipartisan, the sellout. Plenty of Republicans have also sold out to the CCP, the Bush family #1. Mm-hmm. But Tibet was sold out a long time ago. In 1988, the Dalai Lama proposed what was called the Strasbourg Accords, when he was asked by Jimmy Carter, former president of the United States, also a Democrat, not to ask for independence because China wouldn't like it. So the Dalai Lama took Tibetan independence off the table, whereas prior to that, Tibetan independence was the one card that Tibet had to play and Tibet activists had to play. And of course, the Dalai Lama's exile in India has caused tremendous stress and difficulty for the Indian government. They protect him and they provide such great security to him, security and protection and care to the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan refugees, which is now 61 years. It's been 61 years since he took flight in March 31st, 1959. He arrived in Arunachal Pradesh and then took a train to Delhi and was met and greeted by Pandit Nehru. And that border, it's a very, very, very long border. It's one of the longest borders in the world. It used to be the Tibet-India border. It's now the India-China border. And instead of just having pilgrims and tradesmen and people coming in and out, you have the People's Liberation Army who are bearing down on the Indian subcontinent and bearing down on Southeast Asia from the high plateau of Tibet. Genghis Khan said, "He who controls Tibet controls the world." And if you've been to Tibet, you know that's the case. Yeah. You feel like you're on the moon. It's quite an extraordinary landscape. But it is also the source of the 9 great rivers of Asia. Yeah. And all but one of those rivers right now in history, Mother Ganges, originates just about 400 or 500 kilometers outside of control of the Chinese Communist Party at the headwaters. Mm. But the rest of them are all controlled at their headwaters by the Chinese Communist Party. And this is creating an environmental catastrophe for the world's most populous continent, Asia. Yeah. And all my friends in Thailand are now calling me also and saying, "Oh my God, Maura, you were right about all those hydro dams that are being built in eastern Tibet, in Kham province, on the Mekong."
Yeah, Mekong, yes.
There's catastrophic water shortage and fish shortage in Southeast Asia, because the lifeblood of Southeast Asia is the Mekong River. Well, it's too late to unbuild those dams. And by turning a blind eye to China's genocide in Tibet and occupation of Tibet and their one-party totalitarian dictatorship, and in fact building up their one-party totalitarian dictatorship, making them rich and powerful, the West is guilty. The West has blood on its hands. Is the West going to go in there and help unbuild all of those hydro dams in Tibet so the people of Southeast Asia can eat? I don't think so. Mm. And by the way, I worked on this for years and years and years, documenting these hydro dams in Tibet. Now, 2 of the great rivers of Tibet, the Yellow River and the Yangtze River. Before these rivers were Chinese rivers or Tibet or Thai rivers or Indian rivers or Pakistan, they were all Tibetan rivers. For example, the Yellow River is called the Machu, which means muddy river in Tibetan. Yeah. And the Yangtze is the Zachu, which means the silver river. And the Mekong is the Drichu, which means the milk river. Mm. And the Brahmaputra is the Yarlung Sangpo. And that's a very, right now the Chinese are building a hydro dam and water diversion project in eastern Tibet that the lamas many centuries ago prophesied would be catastrophic for the whole world. They said it would bring about the end of the world. Here's another Tibetan prophecy from the 8th century I would like to share with your viewers. Okay. You know, Tibet and China were always neighbors, and before the communist system took over China, they were also trading partners and friends and allies. And in fact, from the time of Kublai Khan, the Yuan dynasty, again, forgive my Mandarin pronunciation. It's not. It's fine. You can fix it later. I know you're a graduate. But the time of Kublai Khan and the Yuan dynasty,
yes,
mandate of heaven would not come and bless the Chinese emperor without him receiving ordination and blessing from a Tibetan Lama, from the Sakya sect mostly. And so there was always this priest-patron relationship between China and Tibet. And there are a great many Chinese Buddhist students of the Dalai Lama. And in recent years, many have gotten permission to get pilgrimage visas to come to India and to study with His Holiness Dalai Lama in Dharamsala. I have met many of them there.
Yeah.
And I will tell you a very sad story I have never forgotten. I haven't been to Tibet in a long time because when I was working for Radio Free Asia in Kathmandu, I thought it would put my staff and my sources at risk. So I relied on a lot of my European friends and American friends who managed to go to Tibet on tourist visas to come back with information. Because there's no free press in Tibet. There's no consulate officers there. There's hotels. There's Marlboro. There's big brands. There's elites. There's a Holiday Inn. But there's a police state right there in front of your face. But that doesn't seem to be a problem for the Western elites now, does it? Never has been.
No.
But anyway, my friend Michael was there, and he speaks Tibetan. And I won't give his last name because I don't want to jeopardize his ability to go back. And he met these young Chinese pilgrims from Beijing. And they spoke English. And he said, why did you come to Tibet? And they said, we want to study Buddhism. And he said, don't you know what happened? Don't you know that Chairman Mao came in 1951 and started a war in 1956 with the people of Kham, and there was a huge exodus to central Tibet in 59, the flight of the Dalai Lama to India. Chairman Mao had a total victory. He destroyed 6,000 Buddhist monasteries in Tibet, repositories of an ancient civilization. He looted them of their gold and their jewels and burnt them to the ground, killed all the high lamas, put people like my friend, and put Tibetan monks like my friend Paulin Gasso in jail for the crime of counter-revolutionary thought. And so there are no Buddhist teachers here. They've gone to India and Nepal. And the young Chinese pilgrims started to cry.
Oh.
Because
was that first time for him to hear that story?
Yeah. They didn't, of course, it's like the way Xi Jinping and his gang, the White Hands gang, I know there's the Black Hands gang and the White Hands gang. We used to call them the Red Hands faction in the Tibet movement, has scrubbed all the books, the history books in China of the Tiananmen Square massacre, and has whitewashed the real history of what happened in Tibet. But it's one thing to do it in communist China, but they're also doing it in the West. You try to organize a conference about Tibet and about the Uyghurs, Harvard, Columbia, Princeton, Yale, you'll be shut down so fast. My friends in Harvard tried again and again, never could happen. Last fall, my friends at Students for a Free Tibet tried to organize a small conference at Columbia University in New York City on what I call the Periphery Project. The Uyghurs, the Tibetans, Hong Kong, the Manchus, and Taiwan. And 2 hours before the conference was supposed to start, they were told they had to stop under orders from the Chinese embassy. And of course, we tried to get people to pay attention that this is interference with American students and interference on American soil. Well, it's just as grotesque as having Xinhua have a tower in Times Square. And we were not allowed to have the conference rescheduled in Columbia University. We had a smaller conference in February somewhere near NYU. But this is the length to which they will go to shut down any and all discussion of Tibet. Why does Tibet matter so much to them? It's not just the water. It's not just that it's the perfect launching pad for their missiles. And in my trips to Tibet, I could see it's one of the most militarized places in the whole world. Tibet is a war zone. It is not a realm of peace. That's the belief many people have. It's a place of peace. Oh, no, it is not. Not now. And in fact, a friend of mine who was working, American diplomat, who was based in Chengdu, which is right on what was the Tibet border. Tibet was also partitioned into about 12 different provinces within the PRC. So what they called Tibet is actually only a part of what was Utsang province and Kham province. Because what Qinghai province is actually Amdo, the birthplace of the Dalai Lama. And then Kham, the Khampa soldiers are the ones who smuggled the Dalai Lama to safety in India and put up a big fight in the 56 war against the PLA. They suffered the most. And Kham was partitioned into a great many provinces. But they say that there are still places in Kham that PLA soldiers fear to go.
Oh, because?
They'll get killed.
Oh, right.
There's still a lot of Tibetan patriots up there. I don't know how they're doing now. But again, the length to which they will go to cover, the lengths that the CCP will go to prevent any and all discussion of Tibet is for the reasons we've discussed, the resources, the land, the water, and the minerals, like Xinjiang. Yeah. Some of the world's largest mineral supplies are found in Tibet and in Xinjiang. Mm. Tibet was always called the Western Treasure House in Mandarin, and I won't even try to pronounce it. But and Tibetans are very, very superstitious about eating fish and about swimming, and they do not disturb the waters because it disturbs the hlu, Tibetan word for naga, Sanskrit word for the snake spirits in the underworld that control our disease and water. And a lot of my Tibetan and Thai and Indian friends are saying this virus shows that China has also angered the Nagas. And there was a prophecy in the 8th century when Tibet had a very large empire in Central Asia, that if the Chinese armies ever did get control of Tibet, the snow mountains would turn black and the waters of Asia would turn red with blood. And I woke up last week in terror thinking that's exactly what happened, because another great driver of climate change in Asia is the industrialization of China, and the glaciers in Tibet are melting 3 times faster than glaciers anywhere else in the world. And those glaciers are called the third pole because it's the largest ice mass after the North and South Pole on planet Earth.
Yeah.
And if those glaciers melt, there won't be any water. And they're also building hydro dams at the same time. And the Chinese people will suffer as well. The most polluted of the rivers is the Yellow River, the Machu. The Machu has more dams. It has over 30 hydro dams. It comes from northern Tibet. Again, as you know, it snakes up, then goes out through the top of China. The Yangtze goes right through the center of China, through Wuhan. And the Mekong never went through what was traditionally China. It always went through Tibet down into Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
And they're building so many hydro dams. And I testified about this in front of the United States Congress in 2014. And we tried to get some, couldn't get any media coverage at all. But the room, it was the Rayburn building on Capitol Hill. It was filled with scientists, doctors, Pentagon officials, researchers. They all came up to me afterwards. And I had photographs because me and my fellow researchers paid extra for a Google Earth app where we could get bird's eye view photographs of these hydro dams. And we had maps and we had photographs and our evidence was incontrovertible. And I remember a Pentagon general, a retired general, coming up to me after looking like a ghost saying, how come we never knew any of this? How come we never knew Tibet was so big and Tibet was so important? We thought it was like the size of Bhutan. I said, well, that's because the Chinese Communist Party wants you to think that. But here's my card. Call me if you want any more information. Not one news organization reported on our congressional hearing.
Yeah, that could show that the Communist Party, yes, the CCP and its American collaborators try to say you make Tibet so insignificant to the bilateral relationship between China and the US, and they have been successful so far.
Sure.
Has the political climate in the US and other Western countries for Tibet changed over the year, according to your observation?
Well, it's absolutely changed for the worse.
Oh.
Ever since Obama refused to meet the Dalai Lama. When President Obama refused to meet His Holiness Dalai Lama in 2009, very, very shortly after he was sworn in as president, and he had named Hillary Clinton as his Secretary of State, and her very first statement, official statement to the press after she was sworn in as Secretary of State was, "We will not allow things like Tibet and human rights to interfere with our close relationship with Communist China." Thanks, Hillary. Good work. You did a good job for the CCP. And then Obama refused to meet the Dalai Lama. And I happened to be in Dharamsala. Sorry, he didn't meet the Dalai Lama in September. Hillary made that statement in February, because inauguration is always the end of January. And I was in Dharamsala working for Radio Free Asia when the news came that Obama was not going to meet the Dalai Lama. And we were all very discouraged and very depressed. And one very old friend of mine, another American who'd given his life to the Tibet movement, and there aren't that many of us, because it's just so frustrating and so difficult and so hard to work and not get paid and not get listened to and be shunned and ignored and insulted. There's very few of us who've ever stuck with it very long. And he said, you know, Obama just got the Nobel Peace Prize and he won't meet the Dalai Lama. That means the CCP has really won.
Yeah, unfortunately.
They won.
Yeah.
And that's why Hong Kong is so important, because Hong Kong could be the next Tibet.